So let's actually start with oh, no, just the two of us here. Wonderful. So thank you so much for joining us here. My name is Karsten, and you're watching or listening to the Lean 42 Live at LinkedIn or recording afterwards. We at Lean 42, we are CIO advisors in Europe and North America. We also are host of the Lean Leader Summit, which was just 10 days ago in Munich, where Anita unfortunately could not come as she had another speaking engagement. But we also do a bunch of sessions like this one, and I'm very happy to have Anita Schüttler with me today. She's a sustainability tech circular economy expert. She's a computer scientist. She's a speaker. Just 2 weeks ago, you were at the conference as well. And I'm very excited to have a very good topic with us here today and have you with us today. And you will tell us a little bit more about circularity in IT and what we can do in IT to become more sustainable. And welcome, Anita.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for having me. So let's start this. This is a high level webinar. So if you want more depth, there's a lot more. Just contact me afterwards and we can talk about it. Carsten already introduced me. What I do is I help companies reduce their resource consumption and emissions of their digital products. So this is what this is all about today. Quick agenda. We have some facts and figures, and then I want to talk about why IT emissions are such a secret still, and then we'll get to circular principles and IT. So ICT is responsible for about 5% of the world's emissions right now, and that's more than the aviation sector. And it currently consumes about 9% of the global electricity. I bet this will become more with the current AI hype just taking off. ChatGPT already consumes about as much energy as 33,000 average US household, but rapid improvements in efficiency have helped moderate energy demand. And this is where rebound effects kick in. Yeah, whenever a resource consumption becomes more efficient, the total consumption of that resource increases. It's called the Jevons paradox. Infrastructure and software inefficiencies count for over 50% of emissions in data centers, and web pages are nearly 4 times larger than they were about 15 years ago. The amount of data worldwide doubles about every 2 years, but about 70% of that data is never used, and what is used can already be thrown away about 1 to 3 months afterwards. Microsoft's emissions increased by about 30% in the last 4 years, Google's by about 48% in the last 5 years, largely driven by AI. And AI's water consumption could be half that of the United Kingdom by 2027. And last but not least, the e-waste is the fastest growing waste category worldwide. So that's about as much as the Great Chinese Wall, or even more right now, and it will keep growing. So, all in all, we can say that the IT sector has a big transparency gap with regard to its environmental impacts. And this is why I want to talk about why IT emissions are such a secret still. When a company takes a look at their emissions, it usually does this following the greenhouse gas protocol. And this protocol categorizes emissions in 3 scopes, as they are called. Scope 1 is direct emissions that you have from burning fossil fuels. So, for example, your car fleet, or in IT, it's diesel generators in your data centers. Then in scope 2 is indirect emissions from somebody else burning fossil fuels for you, for example, for electricity, but also heat, steam, cooling, and so on. And in scope 3, it's split into upstream and downstream, is everything that is related to your value chain. So everything that you have to buy in order to be able to do your business, and everything that happens after you've sold your products. So scope 2 is interesting for IT, emissions from buying electricity. And there's two methods for calculating those emissions. One's called market-based, the other location-based. In market-based method, this allows carbon offsetting with green power purchase agreements. So basically, if you buy green electricity from someone, then this allows you to reduce on paper your emissions. And this is a good method for accelerating the energy transition because it incentivizes the expansion of renewables, but it also hides a lot of emissions that occur. And for Microsoft, for example, it's more than 20 times higher location-based emissions than market-based emissions. And location-based are the emissions that occur only from the electricity that you only take from your local grid. So what happens here if you have PV on your company building, then this counts as green electricity, but everything that you just buy doesn't count towards the local location-based method. And this method is needed to make an actual reduction of emissions visible. So until last year, companies could pick one of those two methods, and of course, the market-based emission method was a lot more popular because your balance sheet would look a lot better with this one. So this is again the example from Microsoft, about 20 times as much location-based emissions as market-based emissions. There's a standard comparable to the greenhouse gas protocol, but just for IT. It's from Scott Logic, and you can take a closer look afterwards. They list everywhere that emissions take place in IT. So for example, if you use open source software, that counts towards this as well, but also the hardware that is manufactured and already comes with emissions in it. Cloud providers usually have a lot more data than they pass on to you, so just go and ask them for this. Even if you don't get an answer immediately, this will trigger something and we'll get something going. And measuring is key. I have one example for this. Usually companies use spend-based emissions reporting nowadays, so they calculate that whatever is more costly also causes more emissions. I've brought one example from my work where this was absolutely not the case, but quite on the contrary. So something that cost very little cost a lot of emissions, and vice versa. And we reduced the emissions of this team by about 50% just by tackling this Amazon search service. So now we get to circular principles and IT. The circular economy is based on 3 principles, and what's important, they say it's driven by design. So eliminate waste and pollution, circulate products and materials at their highest value. So recycling comes at the very, very end, but what you want to do is you want to keep those products and materials in use for as long as possible. And then we have to regenerate nature, because just leaving the status quo is not good enough anymore because so much has been destroyed already. And all of these principles are underpinned by a transition to renewable energy. That's what the IT sector is pretty good at already, but everything else we still have to do something about it. So driven by design, it's estimated that over 80% of all product-related environmental impacts are determined during the design phase of a product. And this goes both for physical and digital products. When thinking about a digital product, we usually think that it's software, period. But software needs hardware to run, and hardware needs electricity. And it also has to be manufactured and needs raw materials. The software also has a certain design or a user experience design, and the digital product also has features, a purpose, a business model behind it. And all of this can be tackled. So we can categorize this into how it's made and what it needs to run and what it does. And I'm going to talk about all of these one by one. First, starting with design and UX, because we said that it has to be driven by design. Yeah. From climate product leaders a playbook, how to become a climate conscious product manager, with lots of things that you can read through and lots of tips. So take a look at that. Afterwards, you'll get my slides as well, so you can go through this one by one. But I brought some things just to highlight what you can do by design. Yeah, a lean mindset. So that's very fitting that the company is called Lean 42, because the lean mindset is actually what's most important. Yeah, ask yourself, what can you leave out or what can you remove to maximize value? This is actually what's important. We want to maximize value by leaving things out. So this also means avoid feature bloat. There's a lot of softwares that have so many features in there that they'll drain your battery quite quick. Talk about your KPIs as well. So this is what your product owners, for example, optimize for. And if you have KPIs that are against sustainability, you will never get there because your people will optimize for something else. So I'm from a company that does software for e-commerce. If you have a KPI that says optimize your conversion rate, you will do different things than when you say optimize. That means reduce your sendbacks. And in the end, you can still increase your revenue by reducing your returns, your product returns, instead of optimizing for conversion rate. Have a data policy. Yeah, I said that much data that we collect today isn't actually used. So ask yourself, what and how much and for how long do you need it, and where do you store this? Because data can be stored for quick access or for rare and slow access. And those things that are stored for slow access, for example, a backup that you only need when something goes wrong, that can be stored on a shelf physically. So think about this as a lens through which we look at everything we do. Yeah, have it in the back of your mind for everything that you do. And it doesn't have to be an add-on, but it has to be baked in and embedded in every step of your process. And for embedding sustainability into every step of your process, there's a lot of tools and materials from the Sustainable UX network called SUX. And I'll just link there and you can go and take a look afterwards. Just a few tips. Always design for a direct route to destination so people can easily find and quickly find what they came for and what they want to do. And then there's something called green nudging that aims to make it easy for people to choose a sustainable option. There's something called this attitude behavior gap. So people actually want to behave sustainably, but it's made hard for them usually. Make it easy. Now we get to the software part. Here the Green Software Foundation comes in and defines 3 principles. One is energy efficiency, second, hardware efficiency, and carbon awareness. And I'll quickly guide you through these. So energy efficiency is consume the least amount of electricity possible. There's a lot of things you can do here. I'll just give you this example of the German Environmental Agency. They took a look at different softwares that basically do the same thing. And on the left, we have a text processor, then we have a browser, and then we have CMS. And you can really use very different amounts of energy for basically doing the same thing. There's a fast-growing landscape of measuring tools for software. Best practices, lots of lists already for different use cases. And if you'd like to know more about this, please contact me afterwards. Yeah, one quick example here as well. With millions of users, even small savings add up a lot. And I said that we're in e-commerce and our customers are pretty big, so hundreds of millions of users every year. And if you want to know what you can do about this, there's a built-in tool in Google Chrome. It's called Lighthouse. So you can just right-click and then inspect, and Lighthouse will come up as well. And it will tell you what options for optimizing your website you have, for example. So there's one of these is JavaScript that's not used. So nobody has any value of this. And I've had one customer where only 45 kilobytes of unused JavaScript equal about as much as a flight from Amsterdam to Munich, because they have so many visitors on their page every year. There's tools for this as well, for example, websitecarbon.com, where you can see for just one website an initial load, and you'll get an idea of how good or bad your website is at this. So now we get to the hardware materials and manufacturing part. This is called hardware efficiency. Use the least amount of embodied carbon possible. So embodied carbon, also called embedded carbon, that's the emissions that were released during manufacturing and transport, so mainly manufacturing, in the hardware life cycle. So how much is this actually? For a server that gets a lot of use and has a lot of electricity consumption during its life cycle, it's only 50% only. But the smaller the devices and the more often it gets replaced, the more this embodied carbon kicks in. And a notebook, it's almost 80, and smartphone, even more than 80%. And let's take a look at these first. So this is the principle of keep products and materials in use. You have something that's called software-induced hardware obsolescence. So that is when a software causes so much stress on your hardware that you're inclined to replace your hardware. And I've only had this a few weeks ago with a software that we had bought at our company. It made the notebooks of some colleagues work so hard that you couldn't use this software. And then you can either not use the software or replace your hardware. And this is where software-induced hardware obsolescence comes in. So what you do is you design for old hardware, which usually means that you lower your requirements for hardware. So to use less CPU, less memory as well, first and foremost, yeah. Then we also can make use of refurbished hardware, so buy second-hand hardware that has been reworked and redone. Use your hardware for longer and pass your hardware on to somebody who has lesser needs once you don't need yours anymore. Servers, I said it's only 50%, and here there's a phenomenon called energy proportionality. So this is how much power a server draws for doing actually useful work. And you might think that it's linear, so if it does nothing, then it doesn't consume power, but I guess we all know that is not the case. Once you turn the device on, it already has a static power draw. And then the more you do on the server, the less each application in relation draws energy. So what we want to do is we want to maximize hardware utilization. That's a lot easier in the cloud, of course, because you have a lot more people using and applications using the servers. An optimal load is actually almost completely full. Hardware electricity. Here you get a principle called carbon awareness. So do more when the electricity is clean and less when it's dirty. And I've brought an example from the German grid where you can see, so the small black line is the actual usage, and you can see that there's times when we have excess solar energy or renewable energy in general, and then there's times when that's not the case. So we want to shift workloads that we can shift into those times where the energy is greener. Organic Basics had an example shop. It's not used in production, but where they tried something that's called demand shaping. So if the grid is more dirty, the electricity in the grid is more dirty, the shop will do less. So you just get these outlines instead of pictures. And then cloud location is really important as well, because different countries have a different grid mix and different amount of renewables in the grid. France is a good example of a grid that has low carbon because of lots of nuclear power, but it's not renewable actually. And the northern countries, the Nordics, usually have a lot of hydro, so they're pretty clean. So what you do is you pick your cloud location strategically and then stay there. So don't change all the time, but pick one that has a good amount of renewables in the grid. And then finally, we get to the features and purpose and business model part. This is quick because there's not much to say there. You have to think about it, about it yourself. What do you do with your product? And how can you use your business to advance the transition to circular economy? And I've brought, last but not least, some R's. So there's, in the circular economy, there's this R framework, like reduce, reuse, recycle. You've heard this, I guess. And for digital products, I've brought some, like rethink your business model and your KPIs. So what do you optimize for in your software? Then relocate to a green hoster or a green location. Remove data and software, so also parts of the software or features with little or no value. Reduce the amount of data that you gather, store, and distribute. Refactor inefficient software, especially if it's open source or especially if it's used by a lot of users, then every bit counts. Reuse refurbished hardware, for example, or pass yours on if you don't need it anymore. It can be reused. And repair broken hardware. That's something that's still not done enough, but there will be a right to repair and it will go for everything. And repurpose your software if you can, for example, with donations for nature. In e-commerce, we have the checkout process where there's sometimes donations, or there's companies that have this campaign of 1% for the planet. So 1% of their revenues goes for projects that will restore and regenerate nature. And last but not least, recycle your hardware professionally. It's called ITAD, IT Asset Disposition, and somebody else who does this professional, we will take care of your hardware and either dispose of it in an environmentally friendly way, or they will reuse the hardware for somebody else if it's possible. And this is my last slide. So all in all, digital products do have a tangible impact on the physical world, both people and environment. And I brought you this, it's called the Carbon Tunnel Vision by Jan Konietzko. And it just wants to say that we always take a look at carbon emissions, but there's a lot more going on here. For example, biodiversity loss on the lower left side. There's a lot of raw materials in your hardware, and those raw materials, there's a lot of rare earths in there that usually come from parts of the world that have a lot of biodiversity and usually politically difficult environments, let's say it this way. And we have to reduce the amount of hardware that is used in order to take care of this. And right below this, ecotoxicity, there's a lot of hardware that gets disposed on in some places where it just will destroy the environment there and the people that take care of it as well. And of course, the water crisis on the lower right side. So whenever hardware is cooled with water instead of electricity, there's usually a lot of water just being used and evaporating and going away. And on the lower side, and this is the last one I'll talk about, is overconsumption. Just how much do we consume and how much do we actually need? And that's it from me. So if you want to get in touch, you can find me on LinkedIn here. And we have some time left for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anita. Yes, if you type kind of like questions or comments in LinkedIn, if you watch this live, we're happy to take them now. But also, I know, Anita, you're also on LinkedIn actively. So if you happen to see a rerun of this on LinkedIn, please still feel free to ask a question or comment, as I'm sure we're both monitoring this and we'll kind of like reply or make sure you get an answer. The other, while we wait potentially for a question to come in here, just a quick note as well that we do have like a couple of other topics that we covered over the last 2 years, I think, in different talks here. They are available on our Lean 42 Academy, so you can sign up for free there and kind of like see different webinars and different topics being discussed. So just a little side plug here. We do have just comments so far, not really a question. So Heidi says, great talk. We do have another from Yao, who was actually a speaker at our event 10 days ago. So good feedback here. I think what I really liked, and that's why I kind of like asked you, Anita, to be here with us today, is you really make it tangible, because a lot of people talk about, hey, we need to be kind of like more aware of our consumption, our carbon emissions, but all the other fields that you also said at the end, and kind of like be more cognizant about it and do something. But then when it comes to okay, how do I do it, then it's kind of like a lot of people like are, oh yeah, I try to be, or shut down my laptop when I kind of like don't use it anymore, or things like that. So it's kind of like random little things that people kind of like do here and there, but I really like kind of like your structured approach that helps us to kind of like break it down and really go after items one by one and see how we can consume or cause carbon pollution, and how we can be better. So I really like kind of like all those different pieces that you put together in a really good tangible approach.
Yeah, it's always good to start at things that really make a big difference at the beginning. So that's why I always start with measurement and not hoping that you'll pick the best one just by your gut feeling. And I've had this one example, and that was really, really exciting for me, because I've never had such a great example of this, why spend-based reporting doesn't work at all. So the team had about 80% of their cost in a CDN in AWS, and they thought this is where we have to start. And then we measured, and we found that the search is more than 50% of total emissions. And it was pretty easy. Yeah, we took a look at what servers do they use, and they had the smallest amount of server, type of server actually, but 6 of them in different availability zones. And what we did is we tried using less availability zones and a bigger instance, And by choosing a bigger instance, we got a server that has an ARM processor that is way more efficient energy wise, and that way, boom, emissions were gone in like 10 days of work or so, not even all the time working on it, but
Hmm.
just by switching around things. And there's often something that you can find where just waste is going on,
Hmm.
basically. People didn't have time to do something about it, and as long as no one's coming and asking why something's so expensive, it just goes on and it causes emissions without having any value to it. So
Hmm.
that's what we first look for, and turning things off. That's the best thing you can do, turn things off that you don't need. Yeah.
Ah, very, very good point. Is it something where you feel like the ESG reporting kind of like increases the interest in green IT, or um,
I haven't seen that yet.
okay?
I don't think so, no. Maybe it might now with CSRD starting, so the European Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, because companies have to have a strategy. How
Hmm.
do we get to 1.5 degrees, and what is our trajectory, and how do we get there? So maybe something's coming, but I always feel like as long as companies don't see their IT emissions, and a lot of that is hidden somewhere else, um, nobody will do anything. You have to do a materiality analysis, and if your numbers are too small, the impression is that IT is nothing we have to take care of. So I'm skeptical. That's why I
Okay.
do things like this here today to
Ah.
raise awareness. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it still has a lot of awareness that needs to happen. But I'm wondering from your experience, is it more bigger organizations or corporations that struggle? Is it kind of like the smaller ones that struggle? How kind of like do you see a difference from um, like government agencies versus corporations? Is there one kind of like more interested in this than the others?
Yeah, I think that governments, they, at least the German one, I don't know about other governments, but they already have this topic on their agenda about green coding, as they call it. Yeah, but it's not just coding, so everything else around this as well, a lot of operations and so on. I think there's something coming from there, and I guess it will be government corporations first. That is there something like government corporations? I don't know. Yeah, but that will start doing this, and they have a lot of buying power as well. So it's always hoping for something and seeing what happens then. Yeah.
Okay. Um, if like one of our clients, or if an organization that now watches this says, "Hey, this is great. I want to be like greener and like make this part of my work," of course they can kind of like start and use some of your approaches. But what do you think is like the number one thing they should kind of like start with? You mentioned kind of like in the beginning the measuring. Is that kind of like the very first step to kind of like be aware of what you all got?
Yeah, I usually tell my clients that what you have to do, you have to raise awareness. So somebody should come and like do a talk or whatever. Yeah, or send your people to a conference, or get in touch with the Green Software Foundation and their material, and just raise awareness at the start, because this already changes so much. Yeah, people look at their work in a different way. And then you have to start and measure. There's a lot of open source tools. You don't have to use a proprietary one. You can if you want to, but there's a lot of open source. And my experience is that whenever people see what's going on, they usually have a lot of ideas already what they can do about things that don't look good yet. And especially if you work with engineers, they love tackling problems and improving, and it has a sort of gamification built in. And So then things already start usually. So
Hmm.
raising awareness is the most important thing in my eyes.
Okay. And for organizations that do not have kind of like their own, or do not have like a strong on-prem and kind of like own development kind of like approach, so kind of like a lot of like the coding and the hosting side kind of like falls away. So if we kind of like look at a cloud only organization, so to say,
Yeah.
is there something where you say, hey, this is kind of like your number one thing that you should look for or look at?
Yeah, your number one thing is going there and asking what
The
are the
question.
emissions of that product.
Mm,
And you probably won't get an answer right away, but you get some sort of reaction. And there probably will be people in that organization that already want to push the topic, but cannot because they don't get funding or whatever.
mm,
And going there and asking will make those people stronger and yeah, those initiatives stronger. And at some point, everyone that builds software will have to be able to tell you what are the emissions of that product that I produce. And going there asking is really important. Also, if you're in the cloud, go and ask your cloud provider. They do know, I'm pretty sure, yeah. But you won't get those data easily. Yeah.
okay. Excellent. This was such an amazing talk. Thank you so much, Anita, for joining us today here. For the audience, I think the key takeaway is to read up more on kind of like the insights that Anita provided, and look up some of the sources and links, but also share, spread the news. You can let others in your organization know about this talk, so they can just comment their name in here, so they're aware of it. But also then start with the measuring, start with kind of like informing people in your organization that this is important to do, and then hopefully we all help in reducing our carbon and general environmental footprint.
Yeah. If you want the slides, just contact me and you can have them. And you can just spread them wherever. I don't care. You can, yeah, make them your own.
Great.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. I love it. So again, thank you so much, and then hope to speak soon. And thanks everybody for listening in.
Yeah. Thanks as well. Bye bye.
Bye.